First part of session 81. Let's talk here about the dedication to service. Let's begin. In this session, we're entering a conversation about the first part, at least the conversation between Don and Ra went into, once again, it triggered by Carla's own state on her energy levels. It opened up this initial discussion about the consequences of the contact and the dynamics of how she would get into this trance state, and all the details we're going to talk about it. But this is the first discussion that starts session 81, and then we're going to get into the cycle of the body, which we already sort of explored with the first two archetypes of matrix and potentiator. So we're going to expand on that a little bit more, because it's right in the middle of the session, or around the middle of the session. I'm not sure if I'm going to get all the way there, perhaps because it requires, and I think I want to do it in just one shot, so we can get the whole picture of this process of the body, at least from my perspective. So I'm not sure if I'm going to get there, but we have to begin at some point. And we may just touch on the catalyst of the body, maybe not, we'll see. But the one thing that we're going to talk about for sure is this dynamic of the contact with Ra, and how does that leave us anything for us that is practical or useful. So let's begin with that. And the first question that we have is the one that Don always asks: could you first please tell me the condition of the instrument? And Ra says the physical complex energy is in deficit at this particular space-time nexus due to prolonged psychic accentuation of pre-existing distortions. The remainder of the energy complex levels are as previously stated. So let's just continue reading what Don says. Is this the reason for the instrument's feeling of interrupted weariness? Ra says, there are portions of your space-time in which this may be said to be symptomatic of the psychic greeting reaction. However, the continual weariness is not due to psychic greeting, but is rather an inevitable consequence of this contact. So this is what starts the conversation. And I think out of the first answer that Ra gave, physical complex energy is in deficit, that we kind of know already from Carla, due to prolonged psychic accentuation of pre-existing distortions. This is not clarified further, but it seems to me that this psychic accentuation is another word for psychic attack or psychic greeting, especially because Ra uses the words pre-existing distortions, which is the window in which the negative entity can create these episodes, events, or exacerbations of whatever it is that is present. And I have talked about this in the past, how we can relate to this type of distortions or pre-existing distortions, meaning that you can only be affected by your own weaknesses. And so if you strengthen those weaknesses, so to speak, then you become less of a target for these negative distortions, you see. So that's why I think Ra is talking about here. Psychic accentuation of pre-existing distortion seems like what they were talking about with the psychic attacks or greetings, as they called it afterwards. And the remainder of the energy complex levels are as previously stated. Now, but this led to Don asking, what was the reason of this uninterrupted weariness? So Carla was feeling weary. And Ra says something actually interesting. They say that the continual weariness is not due to psychic greeting, but is an inevitable consequence of this contact. So we're going to get into that. Why is it an inevitable consequence of the contact with Ra? And just to be thorough, Ra did say at the beginning that there are portions of the space-time in which this may be symptomatic of the psychic gradient reaction, but not this case, at least not the majority of the weariness that Carla was feeling. So let's talk about that. Don says in question 3, why is this an inevitable consequence? What is the mechanism of contact creating weariness? Ra explains, the mechanism creating weariness is that connection betwixt the density wherein this instrument's mind-body-spirit complex is safely kept during these workings, and the altogether variant density in which the instrument's physical body complex resides at this space-time. As the instrument takes on more of the coloration of the resting density, the third density experience seems more heavy and wearisome. This was accepted by the instrument as it desired to be of service. Therefore, we accept also this effect about which nothing of which we are aware may be done. So, I feel like Rag got ahead of Don by saying, we have no idea what to do about this. We can't do anything. Right? Because Don would always ask, is there something we can do to alleviate this? So, little things that you can see Ra being clever there to maybe save some time and energy. So, okay, interesting. Let's call it dynamic, right? I think I would call it dynamic of this contact. And there are some important takeaways for us in general. So, okay, so the mechanism creating the weirdness is that connection between the densities, basically, 6th density and third density. Why did I say 6th density? Because I can't remember if I already talked about it or if this in other sessions, but it's hard to talk about Carla, instrument, and mind body spirit complex. 3 linked things, but different, right? Let's use mind body spirit complex as Ross used it here. That is residing in 6th density while they use the body, the instrument, the Carla's chemical body, right? So what would happen is that Carla would go in trance, and then her mind body spirit complex would be resting in 6th density. And that was something that I think I already mentioned in one of the sessions where they talked about it. But in essence, her mind body spirit complex would be in 6th density, guarded by those of Ra, and then she would come back. When she would come back, she would feel this effect. And like I said, we're going to explore it a little bit more. But that's what's happening. I think there's something else that I wanted to mention here. Variant density in which the instrument's physical body complex. I think that was it. It's just a refresher in that. I think there was another refresher I wanted to mention, but yeah, so that's happening, okay? And I don't think there's much else I can say. Trying to think. I think I had something else, but okay. In any case, that's all we need to know. Her visual, maybe a little bit visualization here is that So our consciousness is in third density right now. That's what we experience. That's what we're having at this moment. But we have analogs in ourselves in which, when we go to meditation, for example, we can experience these analogs of, and even in the physical reality, of course. I'm just saying that there are more expedited ways of experiencing these other densities in our analog experience of the energy centers. So keep that in mind, because that's going to be useful for the practical or the useful applications, or what we can derive out of this conversation. So yeah, I think that's all I'm going to mention until now. This was accepted by the instrument as a desire to be of service. This is another point. Ra says that this is accepted by the instrument. So did she consciously know it? Well, she didn't consciously know exactly what this was going to be, but when you decide to do work, it's almost like your own devotion allows you to, or gives permission to, these kind of dynamics, right? So it's almost like unconsciously accepted. Because I wouldn't say that Carla knew, oh yes, I'm going to be in sixth density, and then when I come back, I'm going to feel this weariness as part of the effect of me not residing in this density, and then coming back as a means to create the contact. So Ra says that we accept also this effect about which nothing of which we are aware may be done. We accept also this effect. I suppose they're saying we accept it and know that there's not much we can do, in terms that we're not trying to alleviate this effect. This is just part of the natural dynamic. Yes, that's going to happen as long as you have contact. Much like the result of prolonged meditations will cause an effect on your reality here, and this is something sought after by many and rejected by others. So yeah, it's something that is either accepted or rejected by people. So there we go. Let's move on. Question 4, Don says, is the effect a function of the number of sessions, and has it reached a peak level, or will it continue to increase in effect? It's a good question. Ra says the wearing effect will continue, but should not be confused with the physical energy levels having only to do with the, as you would call it, daily round of experience. In this sphere, those things which are known already to aid this instrument will continue to be of aid. You will, however, notice the gradual increase in transparency, shall we say, of the vibrations of the instrument. So, let's not confuse wearying of the spiritual nature to the physical one. That's important, especially because Don always wanted to know what else to do to aid Carla in her process, in her in her dedication to the service. And there's nothing, like Ra said, that I also feel like this is not so much a problem. I mean, I guess it can be seen as a problem, but dying of old age, at least in the intended version of dying of old age, not dying sick or anything, it's usually characterized by feeling fatigued, and it's a tiredness of just, I'm just tired of life. I'm not tired of life that I want to die, but I'm just, I feel like I have nothing else to do. I'm okay with everything. That would be a peaceful death, right? That everybody would love. And that's what we are meant to have as third density beings. So we want to, because go back to death now. I would dare to say that most people die with some regrets and feeling incomplete, that they could have done more, or whatever other distorted views of themselves they have at the moment of death, right? So if we take all that away and we simply have a placid, very simple experience of feeling fatigued, feeling weary about your life, and saying, I think I've done enough. I just want to my life to end. And that's okay. You don't have to. That's another thing we have in society. You have to live. You have to live. Why? If somebody wants to die, that's perfectly fine decision. You see, and I guess for us it's a little bit gray that you want to die. It's because you're not happy with your life. You can be happy with your life and die. That's fine. My father actually died this way in his own way, even though if it was a little bit unconscious. But I remember talking to him when he was in his last 2 weeks, and we didn't even know that he was going to die. And I think I've mentioned this in this podcast before, but I sent him a voice note, and because we were in different countries, and I simply encouraged him and said, don't feel that dying is a terrible thing. If that's what you want to do, because he was facing the possibility of cancer treatment and so on, and I told the same thing to my mom. It's okay to die. We have a taboo about death that we need to, as a culture, I think we need to normalize a bit more. So this is what I'm referring to here, and I think this is the same effect. Why? Because it is a disconnect between the experience of higher densities with third density. I feel like I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself with other information that is here, so I won't continue, but that's what it seems to me. And Ross says the wearing effect will continue because as the contact continues, then this effect of residing in sixth density and coming back to third density provokes this effect of just feeling tired here in this density. It's not tired as a being in general, just here in third density. Ross says, in this sphere, and I believe they're talking about the physical energies at this point, because they're saying not to be confused with the physical energies, which have to do more with the physical activity of the daily round of activities. Ross says, in this sphere, those things which are known already to aid the instrument will continue to be of aid, which is everything that you're doing, it's fine, you can continue to do it to preserve the physical energy. Ross says, you will, however, notice the gradual increase in transparency of the vibrations of the instrument, which is a beautiful effect, of course, of being able to reside in sixth density in the way Carla was doing it. Like I said, this effect is also part of meditation. Ra doesn't say it here, but this is just me saying it. So take it with a grain of salt. I just want to create that bridge into the tendency that the mind will have and say, oh, I wish I could reside in sixth density so I can become more transparent. But these are not the only ways to become a transparent being, which is what Ra is referring to here, that transparency of being. This happens as you gradually become more aware of who you are, which is my own direction and my own path, is to become transparent automatically by residing in your own being. This is the here and now, what Eckhart Tolle talks about, what Rupert Spira, of course, is more than anybody in my life, has an affinity with what I teach and I talk about. Muji, Aaron Apke talks about this in part of his program, which is the I Am. Many people in the past have talked. I mean, this is the mystical path in general. So you become more transparent. And do you have to meditate for hours and hours? No. Meditation is something that we do because we enjoy and we love out of this realization. But meditation does not lead to realization of this. It's something that happens at any moment, and you don't have to progress towards that because you already are that. So I just wanted to mention that transparency of being is available to all of us from the simple recognition of who we are. Okay, but Carla, part of this effect was to become more transparent. And Don is going to ask a little bit more about this. In question 5, Don says, I didn't understand what you meant by that last statement. Would you explain? And Ross says, weariness of the time-space nature may be seen to be that reaction of transparent or pure vibrations with impure, confused, or opaque environs. That's beautiful. So, again, take it with a grain of salt, because this is just my interpretation, as you have been warned over and over again. So there's a couple of things here. Let's make the connection between weariness. Weariness for us is something that it's taking as negative. We don't want it. And let me say that this is at everybody's discernment and judgment. It's up to you if this is a weariness that you are inclined to get into. So it's part of this transformation of the spiritual path, or if you want to remain more as the physical being that you are. You're not sacrificing. In fact, I shouldn't have said that. You're not sacrificing your physical being. It's just it has nothing to do with the physical being. It's the experience. Let's say, I'll give you an example so you can know exactly what I'm talking about. This is a perfect example. So when you have, let's say all of you have had an emotion that is cyclical in nature, that repeats over and over. And once you get rid of, sounds a little bit too drastic to say that you get rid of it, but once you are able to transcend this reactivity in you, then you're becoming a lot more transparent, right? That is the disassociation with the reaction. And you will find that a lot of people would say, like, how come you're not reacting like this in front of this situation? And they would look at you as somebody who is weird, or you shouldn't be reacting with this pacific view, or this calm reaction. You should be enraged. You should be all these things, right? We can say poetically that they're trying to drag you into the emotive environment of third density, and even that is it's kind of qualifying third density as something that is impure, and I don't like that. I'm going to clarify a couple of these terms here because they don't do honor to what it's really happening in my view. But yeah, that's a good example. You see, you get rid of these emotions or transcend them, that reactivity that causes you to have those emotions. And so you're disconnecting yourself from that web of reactivity in people and the environment in general. So you can call this the same effect. The more you engage in this discipline of becoming more transparent, that's what it is. It's just you're not against or you're not for any of these things just become transparent to it. So that's the weirdness that, to me, Ra is talking about here when they say that the weirdness of the time-space nature may be seen to be that reaction of transparent or pure vibrations with impure, confused, or opaque environs. So look at the two. If you segment this into two, you can see that we're trying to define this weirdness of time-space in which you, in essence, you know that the lessons of third density have passed on your own individual path, because you see that all those things that used to cause catalyst to you are already processed. So you become this you become more the creator. That's basically it. And that feeling of being more in line with what is desires more experience, higher experience, let's call it, and that would be ascension, if you will. So we can talk about this for a while. There's so much in here, but I just want to keep going with the definition of these weirdness of time-space, which again, Ra describes, may be seen to be that reaction of transparent or pure vibrations of being, of simply being, against the contrast, this is the contrast of impure, confused, or opaque environs. Now, before I wrap this up, let me also clarify some terms here and put it into context, because I already see in my own database of listening to people express themselves about third density or 3D. People talk about, that's just 3D stuff. I don't get involved in 3D stuff, or I don't like 3D stuff. I'm tired of 3D stuff. 3D has become a dirty sort of experience, you see. So I can see how these words can be also used for that. So why would Ra say impure, confused, or opaque environs? What is the purpose of third density first? The purpose of third density is confusion. Okay, so we want this. This is something desired by us, by the self, by the creator. It is by the separate self that is rejected, that is said, this is confusion, I hate it, I want to go back to being a wanderer of sixth density, and so on. This is the separate self talking, it's not the creator. So you have to be very careful to discern your thoughts and say, is this actually the creator saying this, or is it a thought? Is it a thought pattern that is just trying to escape this reality because it's trying to find peace somewhere else in another density, because it's not here. 3D is not of peace. So I hear all these conversations about, 3D is all about the ego, so you got to get used to the ego, and the ego, you can't get rid of the ego, and all these things. These are separate self-talks. They don't deceive me. I can hear it. I can see that they're not in line with the rest of the cosmic view of creation. Why would then the creator have 3D or third density? And why would most people say that this is, not most people, all people, I would say, who are knowledgeable about, and I'm talking about high metaphysics here, they say third density, the human experience, is the most coveted experience by the creator. It really is. And I've been saying it for a long time. I actually remember in the first year of starting this podcast, I remember saying that at the beginning, and I confessed, at the beginning, once I knew that there was an ascension and harvest and all these things, I said, I'm going to work towards that, because that's me. I need to save myself. Then I realized, who's trying to save itself? It didn't take me long. And from that point, I started appreciating third density more. And I said, if I had to come back, I would come back over and over again because this is way too much fun from this perspective. But I do acknowledge that a lot of people are suffering from the unaware principle of third density, and I do acknowledge that. I'm not trying to dismiss it. But in any case, these words of impure, confused, and opaque environs are meant to describe the confused state, as Ra actually used that word, the mixed state of the human mind, of not knowing what is. Is it separation or is it unity? That's the choice, isn't it? So these are the elements that describe our third density. These are the elements that are part of the experience of being a human. If we didn't have these elements, then we would be very dull humans, people in general. Why? Because the veil wouldn't exist and we would go back to pre-veil conditions where experience was boring. Potential was huge, but experience was boring, as Ra described. So these impure, confused. What is impure? Impure in our, let's take away the religious definition of something that is tainted, something that has been tarnished by the sensuality of, and even Buddhists will talk about this. You have to be pure this way, and that's not true. There is no impurity of avoided, disgusting, and then there is the purity of the divine and all of this. It means this: if you are confused, then that is an impurity of sight. Your awareness is impure. Pure awareness is knowing what is, knowing yourself. That's why you'll see me and hear me say this a million times until I die, is knowing yourself. Is if you know that you are the knowing element of this reality, that is the most pure vision you can have. So impurity in this third density is about the natural state of confusion or darkness that prevents awareness to see itself for what it is, and it confuses itself with the separate self. So you see, that is the impure part, the opaque. See, opaque is not something dirty. Opaque is not something terrible that we should avoid, because on the bottom is all this hell that we should avoid, and at the top is this heaven that we should reach. No, that is a wrong interpretation, and I say this with all my heart. That is a wrong interpretation of what purity is. Purity is about you knowing what is. And like I said, I'm not dismissing that this is not true for the majority of people on earth, and I can see the suffering that is generated by this confusion, but this is the intended meaning of Ra. So to wrap it up, like I said, the weirdness that is experienced in this recognition of the full awareness of the self, especially in sixth density, these experiences create contrast with third density. Does this mean I don't want to live anymore? I'm getting weary of life? It depends on you. That may be. I don't know. But in my experience, this has strengthened my desire to live in this world, to enjoy every single aspect of it, because I know that this is what the whole cosmos was created for, everything else. Ra talks about the other densities as ethereolated, which means pale, weak. In terms of experience, there is not much in there. You see, sure, there may be a feeling of divinity and what else maybe describe pure love and so forth. And those, it's not like this is the most important experience. Every experience has its equal, or is equal. But I'm trying to, because third density has been actually so so diminished in spiritual talk. I'm trying to elevate it. So that's all I'm doing. I'm not saying that 3D is better than 4D or whatever Ds you want to put out there. I'm just saying that I'm going to go in favor of 3D because it has been trampled on so much, and it needs to be equal to the others. All right, let's move on. In question 6, Don says, is there any of this effect upon the other two of us in this group? And Ross says, this is quite correct. So Don follows up and says, then we would also experience the uninterrupted wearying effect as a consequence of the contact. Is this correct? Ross says, the instrument, by the very nature of the contact, bears the brunt of this effect. Each of the of the support group, by offering the love and the light of the one infinite creator in unqualified support in these workings and in energy transfers for the purpose of these workings, experiences between 10 and 15% roughly of this effect. It is cumulative and identical in the continual nature of its manifestation. So Don is asking, are me and Jim also having this effect? And Ross says yes. And then Don asks something that I don't remember. Then we would also experience uninterrupted wearing effect as a consequence. So the three of them will experience, right? Don is now becoming aware that him and Jim will also feel this effect. And Ross says, of course, yes, you will. And they explain that, first of all, Carla was the one that was taking the brunt of the effect. This manifested in all the different ways that we see. And yeah, especially that crystallizing effect that Carla felt. I think that was very noticeable in her. Okay, each of the support group, which is Don and Jim, by offering the love and the light of the one infinite creator in unqualified support in these workings. So by doing that offering of love and light of the one infinite creator to the contact, in essence saying that their desire, their pure desire and desire to serve into the contact, that would create part of this effect, but also the energy transfers for the purpose of these workings. So I can just summarize this as your dedication to this contact and to want to create this dynamic of conversation does produce this effect. Now they give a percentage, which is interesting. I don't know what to do with this percentage, but they say between 10 and 15% of the effect. Would that be of the total effect? Is that 10 and 15 for both of them? So 20 to 30%, or individually, or combined? So 5 to 7.5%. I don't know. I love numbers, so these are the questions that come up to my mind when I read things like this. So I don't know. But Ross says it is cumulative and identical in the continual nature of its manifestation. So just like Carla will continue feeling, it's cumulative, meaning that yes, if they would have stopped at 5 sessions, then of course no more of this effect would happen. It's almost like meditation. Meditation is cumulative as well. You cannot take away what you have done in meditation. This is why the Confederation, in one of the channelings, several of them, I think, they say, don't try to measure the progress of meditation. What happens in meditation happens of itself. You don't have to measure anything. And in fact, I would say that your desire to want to know what happened in meditation, did I progress, am I advancing, that would diminish the effect of meditation. Or it's not diminish, but prevent. I hope you see what I mean. It's not that it's going to diminish what you did already. It's just that will slow down whatever it is that you created. I feel like that's not exactly what I want to say. Worrying about what you did in meditation or what happened in meditation simply takes you away from meditation. Let's put it that way. So the effect doesn't last that long because you're worrying about your meditation. So yeah, it's a cumulative effect as well. Okay, let's move on. Don says, what could be the result of this continued wearying effect after a long period? Ron explains, it's a rather long answer. You ask a general query with infinite answers. We shall overgeneralize in order to attempt to reply. One group might be tempted to, and thus lose the very contact which caused the difficulty. So the story would end. Another group might be strong at first, but not faithful in the face of difficulty. Thus the story would end. Another group might choose the path of martyrdom in its completeness and use the instrument until its physical body complex failed from the harsh toll demanded when all energy was gone. Let me finish reading. Ra continues and says, this particular group at this particular nexus is attempting to conserve the vital energy of the instrument. It is attempting to balance love of service and wisdom of service. And it is faithful to the service in the face of difficulty. Temptation has not yet ended this group story. So, yeah, let's stop here and analyze this. So, first of all, allergies are terrible for me this year. Well, there always are, but this is the time of the year that I feel this constant nuisance in my nose. Thank you, pollen. Anyhow, I hope you're doing well wherever you are. Not being affected too much by this beauty of spring. That your eyes, your nose, and your lungs or throats are not very grateful for. If you're affected like me. Alright, in any case, Ra says, you ask a general query with infinite answers, of course, like what would happen. I love that Ra always emphasizes this. Because Don's question is, what could be the result of this? You know, it's like saying, what could be the result of me meditating for a long time? But in this case, they're talking about the what would happen in this continuous contact, because we're talking about the contact with Ra and the wearying effect that is happening because of the contact. And so Ra says that one group may be tempted and then lose the contact. This is something that was kind of discussed as well. There's a parallel here when Ra talked about the attempts that the negative entity, the fifth density negative entity, was trying to do with the group, and those were basically to finish the contact, right? So it wanted to accelerate this process of the contact. So it ended. And so this one is one of the possibilities is that the group will be tempted, and yeah, after that lose the very contact which caused the difficulty. So yep, that's it. It would end. No more problem, no more weirdness. Another group might be strong at first, but not faithful in the face of difficulty. So give up and not be tempted in this case, but just give up because, like I said, I think it was very commendable that Carla, Don, and Jim, in spite of, or despite the difficulties that they faced, which was literally Carla possibly dying in right there in where she was laying down, and they just continued. So they were faithful in the face of difficulty and continued. So that's not them. That would be another group. Then another group might choose the path of martyrdom in its completeness, which it's something that they were probably going to do if Ra didn't warn them about, or they were. It's not Ra. They were a little curious too about Carla's health and so on, and so Ra was able to give them some indications there, and that's where they mostly infringe on free will, Ra, when they had to give some information about Carla now and then, and just to maintain the contact because they were grateful as well of the contact. So, but yeah, martyrdom would just in essence deplete the body complex of the instrument, and that's it. Once it dies, then the contact is gone, and that's it. That would end. Then Ra says that this particular group is attempting to conserve the vital energy of the instrument, which they did. And they're also attempting to balance love and wisdom, in essence, their service. Love of service and wisdom of service. And it's faithful in the service, to the service of, and it is faithful to the service in the face of difficulty, which I mentioned already. They weren't affected, in essence, by the difficulties they had to face. Temptation has not yet ended this group's story, which Ra also talked about. They just didn't care about the temptations that were offered. So finally, Ra says, we may not know the future, but the probability of this situation continuing over a relatively substantial period of your space-time is large. The significant factor is the will of the instrument and of the group to serve. That is the only cause for balancing the slowly increasing weariness which will continue to distort your perceptions. Without this will, the contact might be possible, but finally seem too much of an effort. So Ra covers their backs and say, we don't know the future, but it seems like the probability of this situation in this dynamic continuing is large. Now, what is large? We don't know. Were they wrong? Because when did this end? This was March 1982, and I think the contact ended somewhere around the midst of 1984, so a couple of years. Were they able to see it? Probably not. Ra wasn't keen on trying to predict anything. So, in any case, a significant factor is the will of all of them to serve. That is the only cause for balancing the slowly increasing weariness, which will continue to distort your perceptions. It's interesting that they say the weariness distorts perception. And so these perceptions align. I feel like there's a level or degree of integration that is needed in this effect once it's felt by people. I don't know how they dealt with this, and yeah, even let me not go there. It's just speculation. Without this will, the contact might be possible, but finally seem too much of an effort. So yeah, where you put your attention, that's where your energy goes, and that is equal here, equally important. So, will and faith, once again. I love that will and faith are always present in these indications. But all right, let's move on. Okay, I think we're on question 9, right? Yes. So Don says in question 9, the instrument would like to know why she has a feeling of increased vital energy. Ra says we leave this answer to the instrument. And Don says she would like to know if she has an increased sensitivity to foods. And then Ra says this instrument has an increased sensitivity to all stimuli. It is well that it use prudence. So why Ra didn't answer the question of why she felt increased vital energies, I don't know. But I guess they wanted Carla to know, to figure it out for herself. They would normally answer that question, I think, but they didn't, so I'm not sure why not. And then Dawn asking about her sensitivity to foods, and Ross says that she has an increased sensitivity to all stimuli, and that it's important that she uses prudence. And I think this has to do mostly with the configuration of Carla's mind, which was she was sensitive to a lot of things. We know this. We know that some people are tougher than other people. Others, of course, are more sensitive. So everybody should just pay attention to what they have and what they are. This is probably a good invitation for people to have that discernment of their own manifested self, what they are, and of course to see that in others, to respect that in others. You don't have to make people tough or weak them out for some reason because they're too tough. So we're always trying to balance with some sort of judgment, and that's not an appreciation. You know, people are either flowers or trees. It doesn't matter. It's nature. That's what they are. You appreciate them, and you don't tell the flower that it needs to be stronger. You don't tell the tree that it must have petals. You know, although some trees do have it. But anyhow, that's all I'm going to cover for today because we're nearing the hour, and the next part is going to be part of the body's cycle in the archetypical mind. So we're switching topics here, and I don't want to do it at the end of this episode. Conclusions. I think I want to end with the refresher on the view of our third density, which is something that, let me make the acknowledgement that the state of confusion in which the human is naturally it's great, and the suffering is equal to that confusion, because we only suffer when we're confused. When we know, we don't suffer. So how much do we need to know is the question. How do we end this suffering? I read a comment the other day on my Spanish channel, somebody saying that all that non-duality and becoming the creator and all of that was fine for other densities and so on. In this third density, we're here. It's this sentence that I keep hearing, and so it interests me because this sentence puts the person at that level of I can be safe in this dual manifestation of good and evil. The only thing that feels safe there is the ego. But the nature of the ego is dissatisfaction. So again, I don't feel that. I think everybody wants this dissatisfaction to end, but there is a strong pull by conditioning of the mind to remain there. So, of course, free will is important here, and everybody needs to know when they are ready to transcend that ego and to see beyond the duality as a sort of matrix for your own self. But one of the things that I at least want to contribute is that view that third density is dirty, that third density is bad, that we're suffering here so we can eventually transcend. This is what keeps the wheel of becoming turning. And far from me to say that it should end. In fact, it should never end, because there is no real entity suffering there. The suffering is part of the experience. I wouldn't even say enjoyment of the creator. The creator is so neutral and has no idea of what it's experiencing. It simply is experiencing. It's not being affected. It's not being traumatized. If we take away all our human features from the creator, you begin to see a little bit more what the creator really is. So I guess this is a delicate topic, because it is true that some people are suffering, and their suffering creates even a higher inability to see beyond their suffering. So the people who are interested in this path, then it's more about getting in touch with that beingness and realizing that all is well. Don't take it for granted. Don't take it from somebody who talks on the internet or whoever else you listen to. Experience it yourself. Know it yourself. Then you can become free. All right. Now at the end of this video, before I end, I want to invite you to my Patreon. If you like this podcast and you've been listening to this all this while, and you want to support my continuing work, not only on this podcast, but the other episodes that I'm putting out outside the Law of One and within the Law of One, then please consider joining my Patreon, which you can always find in the description of any platform you're listening to this. And why? Because I'm also creating a space there in which this discussion can be created. It's not only to support my work, which is something that I highly appreciated, because I like to continue doing this, and the more support I have, then the more I can create. And this has been true for a while, and I want to continue doing this. So that's one way for you to do it. I would highly appreciate that. Once you join in, send me a text. You can find the messaging function there in Patreon. I'm not sure how it works on mobile, but on PC you can find it, and it should be there. So consider subscribing to Patreon. I'll leave, like I said, in the description there's a link. And if you're interested, of course, in knowing more about what I do personally in mentoring or coaching, go to my Instagram and DM me there. That's where I have all of that organized. You know how I love my organization. So I would highly appreciate that. Thank you for considering it. And I have nothing else to say, but be well, be safe, and I'll see you in part 2 of session 81.